There are births that scream, and there are births that whisper. The first birth tears you into the world. The second birth calls you back into yourself. Most people remember the former, but the latter? It begins when everything you once called you dissolves in a light too gentle to resist and too powerful to escape. When we think of Kundalini, we imagine an eruption, an uncoiling serpent, a wildfire ascending the spine, tearing apart illusions with volcanic intensity. But not every fire roars. Some fires glow, and some fires become soft, not because they are weak, but because they have already devoured everything. What remains is a warmth that does not demand. It simply exists, and it calls. It is the lover's fire, not the destroyer's. This is the second birth. Not through pain, but through longing. Not through breaking, but through melting. You've likely heard that the dark night of the soul precedes awakening, that the ego must die, that identity must collapse. Yes, but no one tells you what happens after the collapse. They leave you at the ashes. And in those ashes, most seekers wait, cold and forgotten. But one day, something flickers. Not a vision, not a voice, not an answer, but a sensation. As if someone is gently touching your spine from the inside, not to awaken you, but to remind you. You are still here. It is not the serpent rising. It is the serpent returning, not as power, but as presence. In esoteric texts, Kundalini is often described as Shakti, the divine feminine. But what does that mean beyond symbolism? In this second birth, Kundalini no longer appears as a force to command or a weapon to wield. She is no longer something to raise. She is already everywhere. She becomes the field of sensation, not just the energy, the listener, not just the voice, the womb, not just the fire. This is not about doing yoga, chanting mantras, or following protocols. This is about remembering the body as her temple. And when you stop chasing the spiral upward, you feel it. The spiral is already dancing within you. Before, you may have seen your body as a limitation, something to transcend, escape, or silence. But in this second birth, the body becomes a bell, a doorway, a garden of sacred sounds. Every breath carries her. Every cell remembers her rhythm. Even your pain is her pressure, the lover asking, "Will you allow me to open this locked door inside you?" And when you do, what flows out is not energy. It's sorrow. It's ecstasy. It's memory, not just yours, but perhaps that of the soul itself. Old systems taught us to climb, from root to crown, from earth to heaven, from shadow to light. But what if there is no ladder? What if true awakening is not up, but inward? Not a rising, but a spiraling inward until the center dissolves. You begin to feel you are not a seeker anymore. You are being sought.
The fire is no longer behind you, pushing. It is now before you, opening. You are not forcing the serpent up your spine. You are allowing the lover to kiss you open from the inside out. But let's not romanticize this softness, because when the fire becomes gentle, it doesn't hurt less. It hurts truer. You will cry for no reason. You will remember lifetimes you never lived. You will feel heartbreak in places no heart exists. This is not trauma. This is alchemy. It's the process of becoming porous again, no longer armored, no longer resisting. And that's terrifying.
Not because you're losing control, but because you realize you never had it. Many wait for the divine partner, the twin flame, the cosmic union. But the lover has always been within, not as a fantasy, but as a frequency. She comes not in lightning, but in breath, in the quiet between thoughts, in the silence after tears, in the moment when you forget to be someone and become everything. She is not asking you to awaken her. She is asking to awaken you, not as someone new, but as someone true. Let's make this simple. Close your eyes. Take a slow breath in. And as you exhale, imagine not energy rising, but a golden warmth spreading. No rush. No peak, just being held by the fire that no longer burns, but sings. This is the breath of the second birth, the moment when you stop trying to awaken, because you realize you already are.
Over the next days, carry this with you, not as knowledge, but as a question. Where do I still resist gentleness? Can I let the fire soften me instead of destroy me? Is it possible that the thing I fear to feel is the gate? You are not late. You are not lost. You are simply remembering that the serpent does not always strike. Sometimes she caresses, and when she does, you are not born again in fire. You are born again in love.
Longing, not pain, not ecstasy, not even the fire. Just that subtle ache, that almost unbearable sensation that something is missing, not outside of you, but deep within. A memory that can't be recalled, a song without melody, a home you know but have never seen. That is the divine ache. And in the journey of Kundalini, not the one of fireworks and visions, but the true descent into the soul. It is not power that awakens you. It is longing. Once the fires of initial awakening fade, there comes a silence, a spiritual winter, what many mystics have called the desert of the soul. The visions may cease, the synchronicities grow silent, even the energy that once surged in the spine feels quiet. This is not regression. This is the invitation. It is here the ache begins to pulse, not dramatically, but like a heartbeat under still waters. For the initiate, this phase is terrifying. You feel abandoned by the divine. You question everything, your practices, your path, even your sanity. But to those who have walked the path before, those ancient sages whose words echo through hidden scriptures, this phase is sacred. It is the crucible of longing. Once the fires of initial awakening fade, there comes a silence, a spiritual winter, what many mystics have called the desert of the soul. The visions may cease. The synchronicities grow silent. Even the energy that once surged in the spine feels quiet. This is not regression. This is the invitation. It is here the ache begins to pulse, not dramatically, but like a heartbeat under still waters. For the initiate, this phase is terrifying. You feel abandoned by the divine. You question everything, your practices, your path, even your sanity. But to those who have walked the path before, those ancient sages whose words echo through hidden scriptures, this phase is sacred. It is the crucible of longing. Kundalini, often symbolized as a serpent, is thought to rise only upward. But in this chapter of the soul, she descends again, not as punishment, but as grace. When the serpent sleeps again, what is left? You, raw, without the ecstasy, without the energy, without the stories. And in that rawness, a cry is born, not from the mind, from the soul. In Sufi traditions, longing is the highest form of devotion. They call it ishq, not love as possession, love as absence, as surrender. Mevlana Rumi once wrote, "Don't seek the water, become thirsty. Only through thirst can you taste the divine." Kundalini too follows this law. In the phase of longing, your inner landscape is remade. You start to see that longing isn't a flaw to be healed, it's the portal. The ache teaches you patience without expectation, stillness without boredom, surrender without collapse. And in that ache, you begin to listen deeper, not for messages from above, but for the music of your own becoming. What if this ache is not here to break you, but to reshape you? In our culture, longing is seen as lack, as something to solve, to fix. But the mystics knew better. They knew that longing is the most honest prayer, because in longing, the ego cannot pretend. You can't fake ache. You can't perform it. You simply live with it. Let it hollow you out. And in that hollowing, create a chalice for the divine to pour into. The more you ache, the more space you make. And the more space you make, the more you can carry. Eventually, the ache begins to sing, not in words, but in vibration, in silence, in colors you see only behind closed eyes. You may wake in tears, not from sadness, but from the unbearable beauty of absence. You may hear songs in dreams. You may feel a warmth in your spine again, not like fire, but like sunlight on stone. This is not the return of the old fire. It's the birth of a new current, one that doesn't rush upward, but spreads inward. Longing reveals something even more powerful. the illusion of separation. What you ache for is not out there. It was never lost. But the ache creates the mirror, and in the mirror you see the beloved. You see yourself. This is the paradox. Longing both wounds and heals. It both hides and reveals. It is the serpent biting its tail. It is the divine teacher you never asked for but cannot ignore. When you no longer seek to end the ache, something profound happens. The ache becomes companionship. You walk with it, not behind it. You stop asking it for answers, and in return, it gives you depth. It carves your soul like a canyon. And when the next fire comes, it will not burn wildly. It will rise gently, intelligently, with the wisdom only longing can teach. Because now you know. The path was never about finding the divine. It was about becoming empty enough to recognize it had been waiting inside you all along.
When the inner fire softens and longing turns inward, something strange begins to happen. Reality begins to speak, not in words, but in signs, in synchronicities, in archetypes, in dreams that feel older than you, in patterns that feel alive. This is the moment when the serpent begins to speak. For many on the Kundalini path, the first signs that something is shifting are not dramatic, they are subtle. Whispers on the edge of perception. A strange bird that appears in the same place 3 days in a row. A dream in which a stranger gives you a key and you wake up remembering every detail. Or that feeling that certain symbols are starting to glow with meaning even though they never did before. Welcome to the symbolic phase of the awakening. Welcome to the serpent's language. This is the point in the journey where the logical mind begins to take a back seat, because what's coming next cannot be explained. It can only be decoded. The ancient traditions all knew this phase. The Egyptians called it Medu-Neter, the divine speech encoded into symbols.
The alchemists called it green language, twilight language, or language of the birds, a living dialect that only the initiated could feel, not translate. In Jungian psychology, it's the activation of the archetypal unconscious when symbols rise from the depths and begin to shape your reality. But for the awakened, it's the Kundalini speaking. Once your inner temple has been stirred, once the flame is lit, the external world begins to change. Not literally, but metaphorically. And metaphor is power. A feather on the ground is no longer just a feather. It becomes a message, a frequency marker, a reminder from something deeper. Your mind isn't making this up. It's tuning in. That's what makes this phase so shocking to modern people. We've been taught to distrust anything that doesn't have a direct cause and effect. But Kundalini doesn't work like that. Kundalini speaks in metaphor because the body, mind, and soul are symbolic systems. Your spine is a ladder. Your chakras are ancient mandalas. Your breath is a code. And once you see it, you can't unsee it.
This is also the stage where archetypes begin to emerge. and it can be as frightening as it is illuminating. You may begin to dream of ancient gods, powerful animals, or symbols you don't even recognize but feel eerily familiar with. A lion watches you silently. A golden eye follows you in dreams. A double helix staircase leads you toward an orb of light, but you never reach it. These aren't random. They are you, the you that exists beneath personality and history. The language of Kundalini is also the language of who you've always been. This is what ancient initiatory cultures meant when they spoke of meeting the gods, not external deities, but internal truths. To awaken is to remember. To remember is to decode. Across the ancient world, you'll find echoes of the same codes, not in sentences, but in forms. The spirals at Newgrange in Ireland, the Uraeus serpent over the pharaoh's brow, the double-headed jaguar of the Mayans, the coiled dragons in Chinese mythology, the snake that guards the staff of Asclepius, the Ouroboros swallowing its tail.
These are not art. These are reminders. And once the Kundalini awakens in you, these forms don't feel distant anymore. They feel personal, as if they were made for you, because they were. The serpent doesn't just rise through the spine, it rises through memory, through story, through blood. It moves through cultures and timelines like a code looking for resonance. When it finds you, it doesn't say, "Hello." It shows you a symbol. Many people on this path experience a sudden flood of synchronicities, coincidences that feel too precise, too meaningful to be random. Repeated numbers, 1111, 333, 707. A book falls off a shelf with the exact passage you needed. You dream of a person you haven't seen in years. Then they call. A song plays on the radio with lyrics echoing your thoughts. You think of a question and see the answer on a billboard moments later. Is it magic? Maybe. Is it madness? Possibly. But the awakened know this is the universe speaking back. Once Kundalini is activated, you become a living antenna for information encoded in reality itself. Not information in words, information in patterns. Because Kundalini is not a teacher, it is a tuner. What most spiritual traditions ignore is that your body also becomes a part of the symbolic language. A sudden ache in the heart during meditation. A vibration in the third eye before sleep. A burning in the base of your spine when you hear sacred music. Tears that fall without sadness. Laughter that rises without joy. These are the body's glyphs, the hieroglyphs of sensation. Kundalini does not separate mind from body, it weaves them. Your symptoms are not malfunctions, they are messages. Your sensations are not distractions, they are instructions. To walk this path is to relearn the body's forgotten alphabet. But be warned, this phase is also marked by confusion, misinterpretation, and sometimes obsession. Not every pattern is a message. Not every number sequence is a sign. Not every archetype that appears is a guide. Some are mirrors, some are tests. And this is what makes this phase dangerous. If you mistake the symbol for the source, you get trapped in the very world you were meant to awaken from.
The serpent speaks to wake you up, not to keep you chasing its tail. So how do you know what's real? You don't. You feel. And this is the great challenge of the serpent's language. It demands that you trust something deeper than logic, but more ancient than emotion. It demands that you become the symbol yourself. When you fully embody this phase, something changes in how you walk through the world. You begin to speak with your presence. You begin to feel truth instead of arguing about it. You begin to act like someone who's remembering instead of someone still searching. Your thoughts change texture. Your voice changes tone. Your art becomes more mythic. Your choices become more symbolic. You don't just speak words anymore. You speak meaning. And the universe responds accordingly. Over the next days, carry this with you, not as knowledge, but as a question. Where do I still resist gentleness? Can I let the fire soften me instead of destroy me? Is it possible that the thing I fear to feel is the gate? You are not late. You are not lost. You are simply remembering that the serpent does not always strike. Sometimes she caresses. And when she does, you are not born again in fire. You were born again in love. You have climbed the ladder. You have spoken the language of the symbols. You have glimpsed the architecture of truth. Now comes the part no one warns you about, when the truths begin to unravel. You thought you were close. You had the visions. You felt the patterns. You heard the voice behind the veil. But suddenly, all of it begins to slip. The dreams dry up. The synchronicities fade. The sense of divine clarity vanishes, replaced by an eerie silence. No more feathers. No more angel numbers. No more reassurance. You're not falling backward. You're falling through. This is the great unraveling, the next hidden chamber of the Kundalini journey, where even the sacred symbols collapse. And the one thing you thought would carry you, your spiritual knowledge, becomes useless. In this stage, the mind tries to hold on. It says, maybe I've lost my connection. Maybe I've done something wrong. Maybe I need to go back and meditate more, journal more, cleanse more. But the more you try to grab at what's disappearing, the more it dissolves in your hands. This isn't punishment, it's passage. Because the deeper you go into awakening, the more everything you know has to be sacrificed, including the tools that brought you here. This is why mystics fall silent. This is why prophets go into exile. This is why ancient initiates were stripped of their names before entering the final chamber. You were not being abandoned, you were being emptied. This is the part of the path most spiritual communities don't talk about. Why? Because it's terrifying. In this phase, your favorite spiritual books feel like fairy tales. The teachers you once revered seem like actors. Your meditations grow hollow. Your prayers feel mechanical. Even your own downloads seem suspect. You question everything, including your sanity. And yet, this is sacred. Because here, you're being asked to see something most never see. That your entire spiritual framework, even the enlightened version, was another costume, a well-lit, beautifully decorated cage. Now, it's being burned down. This is not about forgetting facts. It's about unraveling identities. You were the seeker. You were the knower. You were the one who understood symbols, chakras, energies, dreams. But what happens when that person, that entire identity, dissolves? You become something far more dangerous. You become no one. And in that terrifying vacuum, the ego screams. It tells you to retreat, to go back to the language, to find a new teacher, to find a new system, to do something. But there is no doing here, only undoing. If the earlier phase of awakening felt like building an inner temple with sacred space, sacred symbols, sacred silence, this phase is when that temple begins to crack. You may experience deep and clear dreams of destruction, temples collapsing, floods, eclipses. Sudden emotional outbursts, grief, rage, numbness, elation. A sense of identity melting. I don't know who I am anymore. Disorientation in time. Hours feel like days. Days feel like moments. Waves of existential nausea, like the ground is moving under your soul. You are not going insane. You are watching the last traces of your former self disintegrate, not because they were bad, but because they are no longer needed. Truth is not being taken from you. You are being invited to step beyond it. Here, the serpent retreats into silence. You are left alone, not abandoned, but utterly unaccompanied. This is where many turn back. This is where some lose themselves in nihilism. This is where some spiral into despair, addiction, or spiritual bypassing. But the few who stay, the few who trust this unraveling, discover something else. Stillness. Not the kind sold in meditation apps, but a stillness that stares back at you. A stillness that dissolves the need for explanations. A stillness that simply is. The Vedas called this neti, meaning not this, not that. The Gnostics called it the cloud of unknowing. The mystics called it the abyss of God. And the serpent calls it home. In this phase, you may struggle to speak about your experience. Words feel clumsy. Descriptions feel dishonest. Even the word awakening seems wrong. Because how can you explain a fire that melts language itself? This is not depression. This is not burnout. This is not confusion. This is the death of the narrator. And without the narrator, there is no story, only presence. And with presence, there is no need for explanation, because everything is already understood. Slowly, without fanfare, without trumpets, something shifts. You stop asking for signs. You stop needing answers. You stop trying to decode the universe. You simply sit. and listen. And in that silence, a new kind of knowing arises. Not the knowing of the mind, not the knowing of the symbols, not even the knowing of the soul, but a knowing that does not need a knower. And that is the final trick of Kundalini. It teaches you everything, only to teach you that you never needed anything.
At this point, you no longer walk the path. You become it. You realize that the map was you, the signs were you, the gods were masks. The veil was your hand holding it closed. There is nothing left to seek. And yet, paradoxically, this is where true seeking begins. Not seeking more, but seeking less. This is the point when you finally understand the old Zen saying, before enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. After enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. But now, you do it without commentary, without identity, without needing it to mean anything. And in that, you are finally free.
You thought this was the end. It isn't. There is one more phase left, one final descent. Because now that you've unraveled, now that you've emptied, now that the serpent has coiled in the stillness beyond form, you must return, not to the old you, but to the world, to the marketplace, to the family, to the noise, to the dreamers who still chase symbols, not to fix them, but to be among them as one who remembers the silence. This is the moment before the rebirth, the moment when the serpent begins to move again.
You did not climb the mountain to stay there. You climbed so you could descend with light in your hands. You thought it was over. The fire had passed. The ego had collapsed. The mind had surrendered. The story had ended. And in that sacred emptiness, there was stillness, whole, pure, terrifying. But something unexpected begins to happen. From the quiet, a flicker, a warmth, a breath. Not your own, but something that remembers how you once breathed. The flame is back. But this time, it doesn't consume, it inhabits. Let go of the fantasy that light saves. The truth is harsher and more beautiful. Light does not arrive to make life easier. It arrives to infuse life with meaning so sharp, so unfiltered, that it cuts through illusion like glass. The Kundalini, now no longer in upheaval, becomes presence. Not a storm, not a force, but a movement, a pulse, a rhythm, a sacred fire that no longer needs to destroy to awaken. You are not special, but you are now open. And in that openness, Light flows like breath, not through your chakras, but through your actions. This is where many fall into the trap of the guru mask. They believe the fire has made them holy. They believe the flame makes their words sacred. But truth does not echo from words anymore. It radiates from your silence, from your patience, from how you hold space when no one is watching, from how you don't react when your old identity is challenged. Truth doesn't need defending now. It walks ahead of you like a breeze you cannot control. And when others feel it, they don't follow you. They follow themselves, because that is what your presence now awakens. You expected something more: wings, visions, followers, purpose. But instead, you make your coffee in silence. You fold your laundry with care. You smile when a stranger yells at you. You cry quietly at beauty without needing to share it online. And this is the miracle. You've become ordinary again. But not the old ordinary. This is sacred ordinariness, touched by flame, carved by silence, and now transparent to the eternal. You walk through the world, and it knows you've returned.
There's no ceremony for what happens next. No master to greet you. No angel to announce your arrival. Just life, as it always was. But now it speaks to you differently. The wind has words. The city hums with stories. The broken have halos only your eyes can see. You begin to notice that the world is still dreaming, but you are no longer a dreamer. You are the mirror that lets others see themselves clearly, maybe for the first time. And that, quietly, becomes your mission. To walk as one who remembers, without needing to be remembered. Your body, once torn apart by energy, begins to soften. Your breath, once a battlefield of sensation, becomes song. Your nervous system, once lit with fire, begins to glow. You find yourself touching the earth with bare feet and weeping, holding someone's hand with reverence as if it were divine, laughing without irony, mourning without self-pity, creating without ego. Your touch is no longer yours. It carries something older than time, and when you touch others, they feel it. Something inside them remembers the flame. You begin to see it everywhere. In a child's spontaneous gaze. In the elderly woman smiling at the sky. In the silence between raindrops. In the stranger who stops, then says, "Thank you." They don't know what they're thanking you for, but something in you touched something in them. It wasn't your words. It wasn't your energy. It was your being. You're no longer chasing destiny. You are now carrying presence, and the world, in its quiet awe, begins to mirror it back. You used to need teachers. You devoured books. You quoted sages. You sought lineages. But now you see them all for what they are. Reflections of what was always in you. And you bow to them, not because they are higher, but because they held the mirror when you couldn't.
You no longer ask for guidance. But when guidance comes, you listen. And when it doesn't, you trust. This is the end of hierarchy and the birth of sovereignty.
Here's the difficult truth. When you returned from the fire, most will not believe you. Not because they don't want to, but because you no longer speak in the old language. You no longer seek validation. You carry no doctrine, and you offer no system. You have only this, a life lived with open presence, and that is too subtle for those still waiting for fireworks. But for the few, the quiet seekers, the ones who've seen glimpses but dared not follow, your existence will be a signal, and they will come, not to follow you, but to walk beside you.
Kundalini doesn't just awaken you once. It returns. But not with pain this time. With joy. Not a childish joy. Not a pleasure-based joy. But a joy that comes from alignment without effort. This is when you speak and it lands. You create and it heals. You walk and it echoes. You rest and it vibrates. The light now uses you, not as a servant, but as a vessel. This is what the serpent becomes. A golden river through your spine, whispering nothing but presence. And you? You are the song it hums into the world.
There's no final climax, no heavenly reward, no cosmic badge, no leveling up. There is only this, life, made sacred, because now the flame is within everything. The traffic jam, the broken tooth, the spilled coffee, the gentle hand on your shoulder. There are no more distractions. There is only one thing left: participation. You're not here to ascend anymore. You're here to descend consciously, to live completely. And in doing so, you become a doorway for others.
No more prayers, no more mantras, no more intentions. Just the silent blessing of existing, fully. The way you breathe, the way you listen, the way you don't need to win anymore, the way you let someone else go first, the way you leave no trace, but something about the air feels changed. This is what the awakened ones do. They bless without touching. They shift the field by simply being, and then they disappear again, like a flame that leaves no smoke, but lights 1,000 candles in its wake.
There comes a point on the inner journey when the spiral does not ascend, but descends, not into regression, but into remembrance. After the peaks of bliss, the visions of stars, and the alchemical fire within, the awakened spirit seeks ground. You may think enlightenment is flight, but spirit was never exiled from the earth, and only forgot how to walk barefoot. In this final phase of the Kundalini path, what the mystics call the return, the fire no longer needs to burn. It hums. The seeker becomes soil again. One of the greatest traps after awakening is the belief that we are now complete. But what if awakening was not an end, but an invitation to become more human. Those who've danced with serpents of light may be tempted to remain above, yet Kundalini is not a stairway out. It's a river returning inward. What if the goal was not to ascend and escape the body, but to pour spirit back into it? In earlier parts of this journey, power surged, visions, psychic shifts, DNA awakening. But now, you find yourself drawn to the mundane. The way tea steams in morning light. The crack of bread shared in silence. The call of birds over empty fields. These become sacraments. This is not regression. This is the circle. The divine remembering the earth it once kissed. We strip down, not in shame, but in reverence. The one who once chanted mantra with cosmic fire now listens to raindrops on tin roofs. The one who decoded the stars now watches ants carry crumbs home. You walk barefoot not to suffer, but to feel. Your hand holds no staff of power, only the trembling fingers of another traveler who forgot they too were divine.
All teachings fade. All forms dissolve. All language becomes too loud. Kundalini in its mature phase teaches without teaching. The silence between your breaths becomes the final scripture. In that silence, the earth breathes with you. She always did. Modern spirituality loves arcs, ladders, stages, but the ancient ones knew truth is a circle. You began as dust. You were shaped by spirit. You burned, transformed, remembered. Now you return. But different. You walk the same path, yet the ground feels sacred now. You touch the same faces, but your gaze blesses. The ego feared annihilation, but what was born instead is a deeper you, still human, fully divine, and finally humble enough to kneel before a flower. The question is not, are you awake? It's, can you live it? Living means holding presence while paying bills. It means loving people who don't see your light. It means being the light, not performing it. True Kundalini burns away all performance. What remains is presence so deep it heals others by simply being. Every culture had temples, but before marble, before shrines, there was earth, the cave, the tree, the stream. In the final return, you no longer seek temples. You recognize you are one, and so is the ground you walk on. With each barefoot step, you reconsecrate the earth. At the start, Kundalini was fire. At the end, it is seed, a spiral within the soil. Silent, alive, waiting. It doesn't shine outward, it pulses inward. And when you walk barefoot across the earth, the seed pulses with you. You do not go back, you complete the circle. Kundalini is not escape, it is embodiment. You are not here to transcend the earth. You are here to illuminate it with every breath, step, and heartbeat. Let the fire settle into the soil. Let the spirit walk barefoot. Let the earth become your altar again.